if we sentence somebody to death, we think that there should be very solid evidence before you do that and before you execute. Now, can we go ahead sentencing a whole country to invasion and to war with thousands and thousands of people killed on thin or no evidence at all?
Welcome back to this special Inside Iraq edition from Cairo. We are discussing the consequences of the war. Hassan Isa, one of the consequences of the war that it unleashed the destructive power of sectarianism as we have never seen it in any part of the Arab world. How do you put this genie back without affecting the entire region with this new menace?
Already it was unleashed by this statement by President Bush before the American troops moved out. They said that the majority of Iraqis are Shiites and they should have the choice of ruling their country, which they have denied all over these years. Already, when he gave this statement, he unleashed this sectarian genie. Second...
Before we go to the second, is that by default or by design? That's the question.
No, I believe by design. I believe definitely by design, because all the repercussions later prove that. So, second, when they started forming this council, when Garner was there, this council only consecrated and deepened the thought and deepened the idea of this sectarism. The Sunnis must have a percentage, the Shiites a percentage, the Kurds a percentage, so it only deepened this. Third, again, when they went into this strange election, which they held under occupation, if you remember, until the day before the elections, people didn't know where to go and vote. So anyway, when they had this election, they only consecrated this again. Then when they formed the cabinet, a percentage of Shiites, a percentage of Sunnis. So at all times, this sectarism was deepened, and the thought of having them, the sectorial ideas, were deepened at all times.
That's a powerful charge. Larry Butler, go ahead.
I couldn't disagree more. Again, don't believe in conspiracy theories. Revolutions are extremely difficult to predict how they're going to progress. Nobody had any conception that you would get these sectarian fractures.
Nobody had a conception, meaning you went into this without knowing what Pandora box are you going to open.
One can never know precisely what will happen. Take what happened at the end of World War II. How many Germans ended up suffering and starving to death in the first couple of years, and how that worked out.
Which dovetails very exactly what Hans Blix just said. You're condemning a nation about something you don't know the consequences of, and that is what's happening in Iraq.
Well, the initial period after we went in and toppled the government, you saw the Iraqi refugees, the more than 1 million refugees that were already outside of the country, start to come home. I mean, this was a positive sign. The outside actors, when you started getting Al-Qaeda coming in, and then you got little help from the other side. This was not an American plan. This could not have been foreseen, and was extremely unfortunate for the people of Iraq.
One country that saw the writing on the wall long time ago was the British. Many scholars, many experts, many wise men not only advised Tony Blair, but the American government, that going into Iraq is going to be the easy part. Going out is going to be the most colossal task facing both the British and the American government. In light of what Larry Butler just said, that somehow we did not know what we are going into, was there another option?
Another option in terms of bringing in all the elements of the political equation? Difficult. Yes, theoretically. In practice, probably not. Again, think back. The people we were dealing with at the time were people who, in many cases, had been exiled, were out of the country.
And they told you it's going to be a cakewalk. It's going to be very easy.
One of them did, but not all of them did. The other great problem that we had was finding homegrown leadership, I think is the best way I could describe it, whether from the Sunni Arab community or from the Shia Arab community. The Kurds had their own homegrown leadership existent and had been working. That exacerbated the problem.
Hisham Yusuf, the war is over. The biggest winner is Iran. Iran right now is not only dominating the region, but it's also giving run for the US money. They want to kick the Americans and the Western powers out of the region. In light of this loggerhead between Tehran and Washington, will Iraq be forever governed and perhaps spinning in the satellites of Iran for years and years to come?
I don't think that this is an accurate characterization of what's happening. There are absolutely differences between Washington and Tehran, but there are also differences between Tehran and a number of Arab countries. So Tehran is a difficult part of this whole equation.
Abdurraufiri, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I think one of the major consequences of this war, immediate, is the rise of Iran. Iran definitely has achieved strategic importance, strategic gains by having Iraq, by spreading its Shia and its influence in Iraq. Also, with Afghanistan, with Taliban going out from or beaten up in Afghanistan, Iran emerges as the major country that has gained out of this. I don't think this was intended, but it resulted from
Larry
this.
Butler, given the importance of the Gulf region because of the tremendous oil reserve in the region, nobody expects the U.S. simply just to pack and leave. But then again, nobody expects the U.S. to stay in Iraq for the longest time. Are we in a catch-22 when it comes to the U.S. in Iraq? Is there a third way?
You know, I think too many people buy into this argument that Iran is somehow 3 meters tall and weighs 300 kilos.
If that is the case, why is it not eclipsed? The U.S. administration itself says the biggest problem we are facing in Iraq is the Iranian influence.
That's one of the two influences from the outside, and what we are missing is a positive influence from the Arab neighbors. A lack of a presence of Arab embassies. An Arab ambassador cannot be found today inside Baghdad.
Hassan Isa, let us take this hypothesis. The Arab League somehow decide, okay, let's help Iraq and let's send 22 ambassadors, let's open 22 embassies. Will that help the Iraqis? Will that help lessen the influence of Iran in Iraq?
I remember a statement by an American diplomat or a politician. I can't remember his name, but he said, the United States destroyed Iraq completely, then handed it over in a silver platter to Iran. And this is what the United States did. But when you talk about opening embassies, now it's unquestionable.
The Egyptian ambassador was killed in Iraq.
Exactly, Ahab al-Sharif. We had our ambassador there, kidnapped and just completely disappeared in thin air.
But what Larry Butler says, we need the help of the Arab countries. I mean, fine, the ambassador, he was killed, but you need to help Iraqis.
Help to do what?
Can I intervene?
Go ahead,
from an angle where I've spent quite a lot of the last 4 years in Baghdad, and I think it's something that people who look at Baghdad from the outside, Iraq from the outside, don't quite absorb. If you're sitting in Baghdad as an Iraqi, unquestionably, you feel that the Arab governments, for one reason or another, haven't properly engaged with you. Whether it's having to set up embassies or actually just to visit and to get into a constructive and a continuous dialogue so that you can both explain to each other what really your policies are and your objectives are. That hasn't to date happened in the way that it needs to. And that is, I agree with Larry, that is an important element in this process of reconciliation, which is key.
When the Arab world wanted to do more for Iraq and participate, for example, in a process of reconciliation, there wasn't that much enthusiasm coming from different circles around the world, including those coming from Washington and Great Britain. So this was important. And we tried to enter Iraq from the reconciliation door. But this wasn't successful. But also, it is important to note that it has to be clarified what exactly does Iraq want from the Arab world. I think
Larry Butler, go ahead. What do you exactly want from the Arab world?
Well, first by acknowledging the important role that Egypt and next Kuwait later this month plays in hosting the so-called expanded neighbors ministerials. And this is the opportunity for Iraq, which was a very dangerous neighbor excluded from the international community, to begin re-engaging. But as a career diplomat, you'd expect me to say there is no substitute for personal diplomacy, having your man, your woman in Baghdad talking to the Iraqis and reporting back unfiltered, not through what you see on TV or what you read in the newspapers, but what you see on the streets and yourself. Is it dangerous? Yes. Your colleague, we share your sense of loss for his fate. You cannot run from terrorists. You cannot run from extremists. If you do, this is not the courage and not the wisdom and not the engagement I'm used to from countries like Egypt and others.
Hassan Isa, one of the negative consequences of this war has been the degrading, if not a big loss, of the U.S. credibility in the region.
Definitely.
Perhaps the French foreign minister summed it best, Kushner, when he said the magic has gone out of the United States. And he's doubtful whether any kind of work by the United States will restore that credibility. Well, is that an accurate, bleak assessment, or was he exaggerating?
No, he was not. He was downgrading what should have been said. The United States, that has been the idol of the Middle East for years, until before the present president took over. It was the idol in the Middle East. Then suddenly, President Bush managed in the last 8 years to get the United States not only to lose its credibility, but I dare say to be hated in the Middle East. Definitely hated for all what it's doing in the area, whether in Iraq or in Lebanon or with the Israelis and the Palestinians, and all that. It lost its credibility. It's lost its position.
Hassan Isa, thank you very much. We'll take a short break now. When we come back, I'm going to ask Abdul Rauf al-Ridi, if U.S. is to stay with permanent bases in Iraq, will that be a source of stability or a magnet for Al-Qaeda and terrorists? Stay with us.